Κυρίες και κύριοι, σας καλωσορίζουμε στο Aristotle Medical Forum 2022 και ειδικά στη συνεδρία αυτήν, η οποία έχει τίτλο «Συμπόσιο Αεροδυστημικής Ιατρικής». Λέγομαι Παναγιώτης Μπαμίδης και θα συντονίσω αυτό το συμπόσιο, το οποίο είναι ιδιαίτερο, γιατί έχουμε εκτός από ιδιαίτερες θεματολογικές περιοχές που δεν είναι σύνηθεις για να καλυφθούν σε ένα τέτοιο συνέδριο και ξεχωριστούς προσκεκλημένους. Οι παρουσιάσεις λοιπόν απαρτίζονται από τρία μέρη ουσιαστικά. Θα ξεκινήσουμε με την φίλη και συνάδελφο, την κυρία Χρυσούλα Παπαδέλη, η οποία έχει μακροχρόνια φυσικά εμπειρία σε αυτό το κομμάτι και είναι η πρωτοπόρος της περιοχής μας σε όλα αυτά και όχι μόνο. Αντιπρόεδρος της Διεθνούς Αστροναυτικής Ακαδημίας και Διευθύντρια του Κέντρου Αεροπορικής Ιατρικής Θεσσαλονίκης και πρόεδρος της Ελληνικής Εταιρείας Αεροδιαστημικής Ιατρικής και Διαστημικών Ερευνών. Θα μας μιλήσει στην αρχή για γενικές έννοιες της ανθρώπινης παρουσίας στο διάστημα, όπως επίσης και τις συνέπειες αυτής, αλλά και το πώς μπορούμε να ανταπεξέλθουμε σε αυτές τις συνέπειες. Μετά το λόγο θα έχει ο εκλεκτός προσκεκλισμένος μας από την Ρουμανία, ο κύριος Δημήτρου Ντόριν Προυνάριου, ο οποίος είναι Chair of the Global Experts Group on Sustainable Lunar Activities within MVA και Member of the Trustees Board of the International Academy of Astronautics. Και είναι και ο πρώτος Ρουμάνος κοσμοναύτης. Γι' αυτό και είναι ιδιαίτερη η δική του παρουσία σήμερα εδώ. Και αφού μας μιλήσει και για τη δική του την εμπειρία, θα προχωρήσουμε σε ακόμα μια ενότητα της αεροδιαστημικής ιατρικής που έχει να κάνει με την παρουσία και τα πειράματα που γίνονται στον χώρο της Ανταρκτικής. Και αφού κάνει μια σύντομη εισαγωγή η Χρυσούλα Παπαδέλη, μετά έχουμε κάποιον που έχει ζήσει εκεί αρκετό καιρό και μάλιστα όχι απλώς σαν προσκεκλημένος αλλά και σαν ειδικός γιατρός, πνευμονολόγος, εντατικονολόγος, που είναι ο Βαγγέλης ο Καμακάμης, που είναι πάρα πολλά χρόνια συνεργάτης μας και φίλος και ο οποίος θα μας μιλήσει για τη δική του εμπειρία από την Ανταρκτική. Τα slides μπορεί να είναι και στα αγγλικά ή κάποιες από τις ομιλίες προφανώς και θα ακολουθήσει προφανώς μια συζήτηση την οποία θα συντονίσουμε. Θα κάνω μια μικρή περίληψη στα αγγλικά για τον τιμόμενο προσκεκλημένο μας και συνέχεια θα προχωρήσουμε στις παρουσιάσεις. So, a short English version of what I said. Thank you for coming, and Humans in Space is the title of this workshop. So, it's not only a pleasure, but an honor to have you here with us. We are exploiting his presence in Greece because he's heading to Athens for another conference that is taking place in Athens. And so we managed to trap him in Thessaloniki for a couple of days just for this purpose. So it's a real pleasure and honor to have you with us. And we start with a short introduction by Chrysula on space and its consequences on human health. And then you will tell us all about it with your own unique experiences. And then we'll switch into Antarctica's space labs, basically, and simulation labs. And Chrysula's introduction will be followed by Vangelis' experience of being and living in Antarctica for a few months. So the floor is yours, Chrysula. We can start.
Hello, everybody. I should like to thank the organizing committee, and specifically, I should like to thank Panagiotis Bamidis and his precious team for their assistance and they're helping us continuously with the space life sciences. So I will talk a little bit about the human presence in space and health consequences. Unfortunately, the time is very limited. I have to speak very quickly, and I will try to give you the best I can. So I will start just with a Greek philosopher, Aristotle, and Aristotle said, "The physi του ιδέν ορέγεται άνθρωπος." That's it. That means by nature humans yearn to learn and explore, because most of the time we're asking ourselves why we want to go to space, because it's in our genes to explore. So before humans, monkeys were into space, and we have here Albert. Albert is a monkey in 1948, but he didn't make it. He was suffocated during flight. 1 year later, Albert too tried, and he survived, but he died on impact. And then another animal, Laika, you all know, the Soviet space dog, who became one of the first animals in space. And there is actually, I put that for Doreen with a stamp, because it's the Romanian stamp from 1959 with Laika, the little dog in space. Then we have the man in space in 1961. You all know Yuri Gagarin. He launched into space for 15 minutes aboard Vostok 1. And then the big mission, human landed on the moon. And we have the famous saying by Neil Armstrong with Apollo 11, that's one small step for a man, one giant leap for mankind. So the expansion of human spaceflight to low Earth orbit and beyond over the past 40 years has provided a challenge to clinicians responsible for the health and safety of astronauts. That's why space medicine is currently entering an evolutionary phase of incorporating the understanding of the physiological changes associated with human spaceflight into the prevention, diagnosis, and treatment of illness and injury in space, but the most important is also leading to Earth applications, which we're going to talk today in our experience. So what is now the difference between Earth's and space atmosphere for humans? So if we look at Mars and Earth, we can see that there are several differences, but one of the main differences is oxygen, which is very low and very important for us, and then gravity. Gravity is very low on Mars. So what is gravity, what is weightlessness, and what is microgravity? All life on Earth evolved to live with the Earth's gravity, and humans are no exception. So as a result, human muscles, bones, various systems depend on gravity to function properly. So gravity is a force of attraction that exists between any two masses, any two bodies, or any two particles. It's the attraction that exists between all objects. And this is Newton's finding in 1600 when he watched an apple falling from the tree, and he said, well, that's the force that pulled the apple. The force that pulled the apple to the ground was the same force that keeps the moon and Earth on its orbit. And every object, whatever the mass is, just have an acceleration, the same acceleration, 9.8 meters per second square. And the reliance of the human body on gravity is clearly seen when gravity is removed. So when we have objects moving away each other, then this force is decreasing. And then you come up to a point where it's zero. So microgravity, I don't know, is that okay? Microgravity is the attraction that one object has to another, but to a lesser degree. Once in orbit, spacecraft and space stations are microgravity environments where there is no gravity. So the microgravity environment of space is very important because the only factor that triggers everything on Earth, gravity, is not there. It's removed. So it's very important to see the mechanism behind this, besides the gravity. So astronauts are not really experiencing weightlessness. We're talking about weightlessness, but it's not weightlessness what they experience. They experience a free fall. It's like you are on an elevator and never stops. That's what they're feeling. And since there is no resistance, all objects will drop at equal rates. We see now a parachute jumper, a skydiver, he's not in free fall because there is a resistance acting on him. So space travel became a reality in 1961. Then a lot of people have been in space, staying from 2 hours until a year and more. And we are hoping that in 21st century, and already started, humans will travel for sightseeing in space, or perhaps live in space. But before space can become a safe, habitable place, we must solve any problems. Aerospace is the right science that establishes the countermeasures to overcome the physiological effects of space. So life in space looks fun, but it places demands on the body. Strange things happen to the human body when people venture into space, and the familiar pull of gravity, which is a signal that tells the body how to act, vanishes. Space travel poses several problems for humans. First of all, the lack of gravity, and we'll talk about that a little bit analytically, the fluid redistribution, dehydration, muscle deterioration, a weakened heart, loss of bone density, disorientation, weakened immune system. Then we have the problem of lack of food, water, and oxygen. We cannot survive without them. The third problem, the psychological effects, depression, anxiety, loneliness, isolation, confinement, insomnia, stressful situations, which is not a very friendly environment. And we have also radiation. We know that on Earth we're protected by a magnetic field. The absence of this shield in space exposes astronauts to greater amounts of radiation, and we can have, it can cause also damage to our DNA. Years after exposure to space radiation, many astronauts have developed cataracts, which is a clouding of the lens in the eye. We have the short term, and then we have the longer term, if we stay longer in space, effects. What we see then is all the systems may be affected in longer stay in space. So let's see the changes more analytically. So the first thing you feel when you go to space is space motion sickness. Most of the people, the majority of astronauts and cosmonauts feel the same way, which is caused by conflicting information that brain receives from the eyes and the vestibular organs in the inner ear. So eyes can see which way is up and down inside the space shuttle because they know what looks like the floor or the ceiling. They know. But if they close their eyes and they just rely on the vestibular system, which works only if there is a pull of gravity, and gravity is not there on the space shuttle or in space, then there is no information. They don't know which way is up. And since gravity is not there, then you don't know. So all the mechanoreceptors of the body are can be fooled by the absence of weight. I just say an example, a Gemini astronaut woke up in the dark and saw something floating around, and he was wondering what it is, and then he realized in a moment that that was his watch on his hand. He didn't even realize his hand. So in microgravity, there is no natural up and down determined by our senses. If you close your eyes in space, how do you determine which way is up? You can't, actually. So you feel like upside down. Then your brain gets confused and you get nausea and disorientation, which may lead to vomiting and loss of appetite. But the good thing is that after a few days, the brain adapts by relying solely on the visual inputs. 60 to 70% of the astronauts experience these symptoms, which is not very comfortable in the beginning, but since in a few days it finishes. Astronauts suffering from space motion sickness may get a headache, loss of appetite. They feel like a knot in their stomach and find it difficult to work. Some astronauts, of course, get sick and vomit, but that will leave in a few days. So now the second big thing is the redistribution of fluids. So on Earth, gravity pulls the fluid to the legs. In space, there is no gravity, so the fluid go from the legs to the head, chest and head. So once this is done, and this is the redistribution, and the head is flooded from fluids, your face is congested, your sinuses will feel congested, and you have a headache, and you can see that before to the left hand and after how it's inflated. And why we call that the Puffy face syndrome? Because there is this fish at your right side of the screen, which is called the Puffy, and that's how we called it the Puffy syndrome. So now all this fluid goes up on the head, and then but passes through the kidneys. And kidneys said, "Well, I'm overflooded. I have to urinate and stop drinking water, so you're not thirsty anymore." And you lose like 20% of blood volume and 1 to 2 liters of the whole fluids. And the loss of fluid concentrate blood cells. And that, what it does, it causes the decreasing of the hormones, erythropoietin, because it's a hormone that stimulates red blood cells, but we don't need, we said. So the decrease of the red blood cells leads to anemia. And the number of red blood cells will decrease about 15% in 3 months, and then will return to normal. So now the change in blood volume also is followed by the blood volume generally, less energy, and the heart will shrink in size because it's not enough blood to work. One way to deal with the fluid, I'm just mentioning a little bit here, is the lower body negative pressure, which is a device that sucks, it's a suction like a vacuum cleaner, sucks the lower body. As you can see in the picture, from the middle body up to the legs, it's sucking the fluids. So it simulates like you are standing, which is, of course, not very comfortable 30 minutes every day. You have muscle atrophy, especially the muscles that we use on the ground to fight gravity. Also, we have 20% of the slow twitch fibers become fast twitch fibers, which are smaller in size. And then fatigue in space is very important. A serious problem can affect performance, in irritability, diminish concentration, and decrease reaction time. So space travelers sleep very poorly in space. They sleep on an average of 2 hours less than everybody else. And we know additionally that there is a circadian rhythm disturbance due to sun rises and sets every 90 minutes, not every 24 hours, which adds to their sleeplessness. And I have here a very nice graph. It shows how the systems are acclimated to microgravity at a different rate. Once you go to space, you can see that in a few days, neurovestibular system gets to adapt. Fluids and electrolytes afterwards, cardiovascular system, red blood cells, all of the systems, but one system is very problematic, and that's the blue line. The blue line is the bone and calcium metabolism. This is a huge problem in space. So we know we need gravity if we want to work it, but can we buy a pill? Of course not. There is no pill of gravity. So what we're trying to do, use other ways. So minimize loss of muscle and bone with exercise, treadmill, rowing machine, bicycle, 2.5 hours every day astronauts are working out, but the result is not effective, it's partially effective. We know though that muscles are adaptable tissues. If you increase the load on them by lifting weights or exercise, they get stronger a little bit, but this is still a problem. So after only 11 days in space, microgravity can shrink muscle fibers as much as 30%. Fortunately, muscles can recover, but what's happening if we go to Mars? I mean, we have to find a way to a countermeasure to prevent this problem. And now we come to the bones, and space travelers can lose on the average of 1 to 2% a month. An osteoporotic person loses type 1, loses, I think I have it, loses 3 to 4%, and type 2 per year. And type 2 loses 1% per year. And here in space, we lose 2% per month. This is way beyond the limits. So here, what we see, we grow higher. I mean, we get height when we go to space because the spine decompresses and you are taller in space. You can see the right image. So all of the bones that were used to just carry the body weight and all that, all these muscles, we don't need it anymore. So they decrease about 1 to 2% a month. Here is what I told you before, and I will go ahead with the next problem. So now we don't need bones. Yes, but calcium, where it goes? Calcium, unfortunately, goes everywhere, and we come up with painful kidney stones. And then we get to the female astronauts. When we are on the ground, we have gravity pulling the blood, there is no problem. But when we're in space and there is no gravity pulling the blood stays there and causes like clotting, even toxic shock, bleeding into rather than inside the uterus. And then another problem is the virus shielding. It's a huge problem in space as well. And we know now that there are some latent viruses very activated often, and this is a concern, and a lot of money are thrown into research for that, especially now with COVID. So this can make astronauts susceptible. So about the medication you're using, mostly this is in 1992, but generally that's about the system medication that they are using. The number is not the same, like first for pain, second for the motion sickness, they need that, especially in the first days. And then for sleep disturbances, this is a big problem in space. And then the gastrointestinal and some other problems. Okay, now we adapted. Now we have to return to Earth. That's the problem. Now, what can we do? Gravity is pulling us, and the heart is so small, muscles are so weak, bones are not very strong. And then the other thing, all this fluid comes up from the head to the legs. So head is not having enough blood, so it's fainting. This is a big problem. Now we need time to readapt, okay? And that will happen in a few days. And then blood volume is restored, and then gives the right signal to the hormone, and then to our brain, and then we drink again, and things come back to reality, to the before flight. So the bone recovery almost never comes to the pre-flight data. Here we can say that from 3 to 6 months space flight, we really need like 2 to 3 years to regain most of the lost bone. You really have to exercise a lot, both in space and after returning, before going to space and after returning. But to stay longer in space, they will need countermeasures. Besides the high level of fitness, we need something additional. So far, we used anti-juice suits, okay, to increase the total peripheral resistance. We use supine position because that helps the heart, increases central venous pressure, so pressure doesn't drop. We have exercises, we said, the lower body negative pressure, partly effective. Salt solution we use to increase the viscosity of the blood, so we can increase the blood pressure. This is all done so far. We have special medication like midocrine, which is a selective alpha-1 adrenergic agonist, and it does constriction and increases blood pressure, because that's the problem. So the most promising so far is human centrifuge. That's one of the most promising before flight and after flight, especially for long duration flights. Actually, there should be, and they are working on that and on research, there should be a centrifuge on board, which is not easy because it's a very heavy device. Actually, the volume is so much. So much more research needs to be done to develop countermeasures to the body's changes in microgravity. And this research must be conducted both on Earth and in outer space. And the results will help to improve the health of astronauts and pave the way for long-term space exploration, such as a trip to Mars. But also, I'm telling you, this is very important also, all this information will give an innovative way to treat osteoporosis. We have a lot of people with osteoporosis, and this will be a solution. So that's about the first part. I tried to do it because I had only 10 minutes. I did it in 15, I think.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chrysoula. I think we'll switch into the next presentation by...
Yes. Okay, and I will continue later.
You continue later on, yes. Okay, so it's a great pleasure, as I said earlier on, to have with us the distinguished guest, the first Romanian cosmonaut, and we thank him a lot for being with us. So the floor is yours, Doreen.
Hello to everybody. After Chrysoula made a so interesting presentation of theoretical things connected with the outer space, I will share with you my own experience. Okay. So the problem of human existence and survival in outer space is still a topic of very comprehensive and complex debates and analysis. So far, only under 600 people have flown into outer space. I had a chance to be the 103rd Earthling to make a space flight 41 years ago in the framework of an international intergovernmental program in which my country, Romania, participates. I will briefly describe what cosmic space represented to me, how I came to be selected, and of course, some considerations on the medical condition during the space flight itself. I had the desire to float through air and space as a child. Not once in my childhood, I had a feeling that if I wave my hands, I can rise like birds, and more than once I dreamed of floating over the valleys of the mountains or rising by my own strength up to the sky. I graduated from the Airspace Engineering Faculty of the Bucharest Polytechnic University. Then, performing military service in 1977, it happened to be at the right time in the right place to find out about the selection for cosmonaut candidates and participate in it. The Air Force Command and the Aeronautical Medical Center at that time were directly involved in the selection of Romanian cosmonaut candidates. Romania was the part of the second group of the Intercosmos program for training and sending into space specialists from the member states of the program. A first group of cosmonaut candidates in the program began training in 1976 and flew into space in 1978. The first non-Russian and non-American cosmonaut in the world was Vladimir Remek from Czechoslovakia. Romania was the 11th country in the world to send a cosmonaut to the outer space. I remember with interest a series of tests that I faced in the condition of technical progress in the medical field at that time, many of them being performed at the Institute of Biomedical Studies in the field of aviation and cosmonautics in Moscow. In the absence of a tomograph, the investigation of the shape and position of the internal organs was done by graphically recording the projection of the internal organs after injection with radioactive isotopes. To determine if there are deposits in the urinary system, we were shaken for 20 minutes, immobilized on a chair, fixed on a vibration platform, after which we had a urine analysis. The study of the exchange of liquids with the environment was performed by analyzing the weight variation, after we were kept for 2 hours in the borrowed chamber at a temperature of 80 degrees centigrade. There were other tests that were meant to be edifying and finalizing our selection of that time. During training, you go through all sorts of extreme but ground control situations. At the simulator, we were induced emergency situations through which the previous cosmonauts have passed on board other spaceships like ours. Thus, you became able to cope with those situations and to have the knowledge and skills necessary to deal with new ones. Jet plane flights, aerobatics, self-flight, skydiving, survival exercises under various climatic conditions have contributed to the new situations. Along with a lot of theoretical knowledge, the various complex training were elements of periodic examination of the cosmonaut candidates and the awarding of grades that ultimately led to the determination of who from the two candidates from each country will fly into space. I was launched into outer space in the evening of May 14, 1981, on board Soyuz 40 spacecraft. After 8 minutes and 50 seconds of accelerated flight accompanied by vibrations, the carrier rocket placed the spacecraft with a new crew on board in lowered orbit at over 200 kilometers of altitude at a speed of 28,000 kilometers per hour. After 28 hours of spaceflight, we docked with the space station Salyut 6. Until 4 o'clock in the morning, we had to test in real flight the operations at the parameters of all the spacecraft equipment and perform the first. One moment. It moves too fast. And perform the first orbital maneuver to rise the orbit. Then rest until noon the next day. After the second orbital maneuver performed about 25 hours after launch, we entered the orbit of junction with the Salyut 6 space laboratory at an altitude of about 350 kilometers above the Earth. The framing on a certain corridor of the approach and the junction with the space laboratory represents a very dynamic and somewhat risky regime of the spaceship, in which the cosmonauts have a lot of work to do. After the docking, we went to the Salyut 6 orbital station, where a host crew of 2 other cosmonauts has been working for 2 months. I spent in outer space 7 days, 20 hours, and 42 minutes. My partner for the spaceflight was cosmonaut Leonid Popov, the crew commander. He was an experienced cosmonaut who had flown another 186 days aboard the same space station, Salyut 6. During our spaceflight, I accomplished a series of scientific experiments, including medical and psychological ones developed by our Romanian specialists. The experiments aimed to obtain particularly valuable information for the dissemination of knowledge in the field of astronautics, astrophysics, nuclear physics, cosmic technology, and biomedical experiments that have contributed to the completion of existing knowledge on the behavior of the human body in specific conditions of cosmic flight. The conclusions helped to design procedures, devices, and strategies to keep astronauts safe and healthy throughout their mission. At the time of my spaceflight, the space medicine was not so performant as it is today. The statistics at that time were poor, as long as both USA and USSR recorded medical data from about 50 astronauts each, and the exchange of information was very much restricted. Now the situation is completely different. Many space agencies developing in cooperation complex medical studies on astronauts, making critical data available to specialists. Under weightlessness, there are many changes and disturbances in the normal functioning of the body. Although in the orbit the sun rises and sets 16 times in 24 hours, we follow a normal program of life and activity with a 24-hour cycle, as if we were working in a laboratory on the ground, so as not to stress additionally the organism from a biological point of view. The risks related to the stress placed on the space traveler refer to gravity fields affecting the spatial orientation, head-eye and hand-eye coordination, balance, locomotion. Some astronauts experience motion sickness. The stresses refer also to isolation, confinement, hostile close environments, space radiation, distance from Earth. Myself, I had blood circulation disturbances with the afferent consequences, changes in the osteomuscular system, metabolism changes, olfactory disturbances. The feeling on the first days in weightlessness, due to the change of hydrostatic blood pressure, is that you sit upside down, the upper body being overfed with blood, and that your feet are cold due to their poor blood supply. A challenge for any cosmonaut is the three-dimensional free-floating movement inside the space laboratory. In time, you get to do it by avoiding hitting the things around you and constantly controlling the orientation in space. The vestibular apparatus, it's also disturbed in the absence of gravity. At first, you feel the need to determine where it's up and where it's down. This attempt often creates false sensations that pass after a few days of weightlessness when you are already used to the three-dimensional free-floating. The lack of gravity creates the feeling that you have no head. The neck muscles are not longer stressed and give you this false reaction. More than once, I felt the need to press my head into one of the walls of the space station, pushing my feet against the opposite wall. In outer space, I slept in the sleeping bag tied to the ceiling of the space station. I felt the need to feel a pillow under my head, as I was used to on Earth. But this could not be done due to the lack of weight of the head. About 2 days, I was a little bit stressed by this situation. Then I adapted and fell asleep quite normally. In weightlessness, when you breathe in a quiet atmosphere, around your airways, expired carbon dioxide accumulates and does not mix with the surrounding air without the help of a fan. I suffered this one the first night on board the orbital station, which led to an alarming condition that was resolved by more experienced colleagues by installing a fan in the area where I slept. Regarding the joints, I had, among other things, almost throughout the spaceflight, pains in the spine, in the lumbar region. I woke up almost regularly around 5:30 in the morning in pain and felt the immediate need to move. During the first meals in weightlessness, I felt that the food stops in the esophagus, although the food bowl continues its way to the stomach. The sensation passed after several meals. On board the space station, my body suffered also from dehydration. I urinated quite a lot, but I did not feel thirsty. The reverse process occurred after I returned to Earth. In the first 2 days, I felt a permanent thirst, even though I drank more liquid than I would have drunk normally. An important problem in spaceflight is related to the level of space radiation and the total dose accumulated by astronauts during the space mission. Exposure to increased radiation can be associated with both short and long-term health consequences. An interesting phenomenon caused by the space radiation consisted in the fact that since I reached the extra-atmospheric altitudes, I saw in front of my eyes small sparkles, like small explosions of different colors, mainly white, red, and green. These were caused by the corpuscular particles in the cosmic radiation that hit the retina and created this sensation in the brain. This continued with a low intensity aboard the space station, then not paying any more attention to them, they had disappeared. The corpuscular radiation also passed through the crystalline of the eye and produced some fine streaks that after several years spread and create cataract. About 20 to 30% of astronauts arrive after years from spaceflight to perform cataract surgery. I'm one of them. Regarding the visual acuity, at the beginning, I had the feeling that it decreased, but after I adapted to the weightlessness and I felt less pressure in my eyeballs, regarding the surface of the Earth through the windows, I found that I see very fine details on the ground. During my space flight, I circled the Earth 125 times, traveling 5,260,000 kilometers with a speed of 28,000 kilometers per hour in 7 days, 20 hours, 42 minutes, and more exactly, 52 seconds. The image seen from the outer space impresses you in many ways. What strikes as soon as you reach the extra-atmospheric heights is the thinness of the Earth's atmosphere. If you compare the Earth with an apple, the thickness of the atmosphere would not be greater than the thickness of its shell. It is almost shocking to understand that in that thin layer, life has developed and all living processes take place, and that we, in our ignorance, pollute this atmosphere by poisoning what we breathe and what future generations will breathe. The cosmos opens new horizons for me. I got to see our own planet from outside, to have a different perception of the space and dimensions of terrestrial phenomena and problems. Cosmonautics has been marked since its inception by medically complex approaches. 61 years have already passed since the historical flight of Yuri Gagarin. Meanwhile, space medicine and psychology related to this type of activity have developed considerably. For humans, the spaceflight remains an act of courage and heroism. Returning to the present days, here are some statistics. So far, the longest uninterrupted cosmic flight was 438 days, made in 1995 by the Russian doctor Valery Polyakov. The longest period spent in space is 879 days, reached by Gennady Padalka during 5 space flights. Peggy Whitson set the record on September 2nd, 2017, for most cumulative days living and working in space by a NASA astronaut at 665 days. She is considered the oldest woman as well in space, reaching 57 years on board the ISS. Mark Van de Hey broke the record for the single longest spaceflight by an American explorer at 341 days, returning from space this year in 2022. Christina Koch accomplished the longest spaceflight by a woman, 328 days on board the ISS, returning from space in February 2020. The youngest cosmonaut in the world at the time of the spaceflight, and the second cosmonaut of the planet, German Titov, was 26 years old when he accomplished his spaceflight in 1961. The oldest astronaut into space was John Glenn, who flew into space for the second time in 1998 at the age of 77. Today, the International Space Station is the most complex and expensive international collaboration project, being permanently inhabited by numerous international crews. When we send people into space, the spectrum of problems arising from this effort is very different from when we send robots. The next generation of space explorers, when humans resume exploring the moon, will reach Mars and asteroids. Even the new generation of space tourists will need a deeper and more comprehensive approach and understanding of all aspects of spaceflight, whether it is done individually or multinational, performed with individuals with different cultures and even different beliefs. In addition to space medicine, this understanding involves various disciplines, such as psychology and sociology, history, philosophy, anthropology, cultural studies, political science, and of course, law. Specialists in the field of medicine, physiology, and airspace psychology will therefore have a lot to research, discover, and implement. I wish them success. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for these unique experiences and sharing them with us. Now we'll go into a short presentation about Antarctica by Chrysula.
Okay, from these two presentations, you understand there is a need for research to support humans in space. And so far, we haven't been able to accomplish this goal. Space is a hostile environment, so we need research for that. To do research, we cannot do with just 600 astronauts in total, and some go one time, some go 2 times. So there's not enough people to. No, it's not okay. Εντάξει, θα το κάνω. So that's why we have the simulated, the analog environment, so we can do more research for several reasons. And among them is that we have much more people that we can test in several environments. We're here. Okay, we're done. So we have 2 kinds of analog environments. We have the field analogs and we have the simulations. So the field is real environments, danger, isolation, confinement. The simulation, it's constructed environments. So it's head-down tilt bed rest, we will see about that in a moment. And why we use these ground-based analogs, I just explained. Not all experiments can be done in flight. There is limited life of the International Space Station. The resources are limited, and they take longer to complete their studies, and ISS may not be the best platform for the study. It allows the selection of best candidates, so before you send astronauts, cosmonauts to space, you know their abilities, because you already tested them. Saves time, money, and what you do with the spaceflight analogs, you just create a situation that produces effects on the human body, similar, not exactly the same, to those experienced in spaceflight, physiological and behavioral cognitive. So we have human subjects like the returning astronauts, we have the bed rest facilities, and we have the submersion. That's the best simulated environments to do research. From the animal point, we have the tail suspension of the rodents, handling suspension. We have the tilt bed rest, as you see, and we managed to have an international standardization procedure, so everybody follows the same standards, and then we can compare among all scientists, we compare our data. And that's a very good support to the space science community. So we have the guidelines for the conditions, the standard conditions that you can use if you do better studies, and we have the standard measures. So there are many facilities. One that we have used for our experiments with Professor Bamidis is the ANV hub. It's the German and DLR based. It's a big and very new, since 2016 field. So what we did, just very briefly, we did research on artificial gravity and metabolic disorders and how this can prevent the metabolic disorders induced by inactivity or bed rest. So we have here the subjects. We studied the hormonal sleep disturbances, arterial stiffness, muscle atrophy, and we have, actually we planned for a human centrifuge, but because it was not possible, so we did the sledge, which is another type of countermeasure. This is our team, Professor Bamidis, and especially Christos Frantsidis, if he went there, and Polixenim, and they helped a lot to collect all the data. So from there, from 2017 to 2021, we had 10 papers published on this data. So we have those recently. Then we come to the subimmersion. This is used to simulate microgravity by the Russians. Now the Chinese also got some subimmersion devices. This is also a good simulation of bed rest and inactivity. And then we can use the animals like a hand-led suspension or the unloading. Unloading is milder. Hand-led suspension is very specific. So we did experiments at Aristotle University in 2004 with the hand-led suspension, and we already have a paper on the electrophysiological and hormonal adaptation of rats in decreased gravity. So that was one of our papers on that. Then you can simulate by parabolic flights. The problem with parabolic flights, it's very short, and you have to do 30, 40 parabolas. The airplane goes up and then goes down, and you feel this free fall, but it's only 24 seconds. So research, it's only limited what you can do in this limited time. So in the field of simulations, we also did the field simulation many, many years ago, and we did it in collaboration with the Geophysical Institute of US. And this is, it's called Kameni. It's a place in Santorini. We did our research on iron bacteria. And these iron bacteria, they can live in low oxygen and high iron. And this is approximately the environment of planet Mars. So this is the students that helped us to do the experiment. And we had also a publication on this issue. Another very interesting simulation is the Antarctic stations. They have for decades been used as research analogs of spacecraft, especially space stations such as Skylab Mir and the International Space Station. And those two environments, what they share is actually isolation, confinement, discomfort, danger, and remoteness. And we have here an excellent scientist, colleague, and member of our association, Dr. Kai Makamis, who is going to present you his experience on that. So in the field of countermeasures, I will be very brief. We developed the Greek short-arm human centrifuge, and we applied space technology on patients. So far, we used whatever we knew from Earth to apply to space, but now I thought that it's good to use the space technology to help people on Earth. So what we did is that, and we succeeded. The team was very successful. We will see if we can just take a look, a very quick look, if it's possible. If not, it's okay. Δεν το κάνω εγώ. Δεν το κάνω.
Οδυσσέα 05. Τέλεια. Οδυσσέα 05. Τέλεια. Για ένα λεπτό. Ναι. Όχι, πάνε ανέβαζε. Δεν θέλει το λεπτό.
We had already 2 publications, and the third is coming up now. And I will just an example of a lady. She was paralyzed, left side paralyzed. She could not feel her left hand, her left foot. And here is some videos. I will not play them. I will play the last one. So the second week of rehabilitation with the centrifuge, the lady started crying. I thought, what happened? I mean, and she said, I'm feeling my head. And then the next moment, next week, she was feeling her foot. And she said, I never felt that for 15 years. And then we started all that, and then in 3 months, space medical research is very important to maintain good quality of life for the astronauts in space, but also improve the quality of life on Earth. And there are many devices that have been produced, developed to help astronauts, and then we use them to help us on Earth, like the automatic insulin pump, the pacemaker, the automated urine analysis and all that. I will not go into details. So in the field of other countermeasures, I will just mention very briefly, because it's a Russian proposal. We have the SUD stimuli, which is electrical stimulator. We have the compensator of support unloading. It's 2 modes of mechanic stimulation on the feet. It's like you are walking. And depending on which stimulation you do, you might have from 75 steps a minute to 120 steps a minute. Then the Corvid, foot loading, imitating gait movement. This is very good for stroke, cerebral palsy, Parkinson, and all that. And the very good suit, the Origin suit. This is also very good at people who cannot walk. I mean, they wear this suit. They're paralyzed, they wear this suit and they walk. This is incredible, all these devices. So space exploration imposes new challenges on human system and terrestrial life in general. So far we know, and we can go up to short missions to the moon. That's it from our technology. But we need to create autonomy, more autonomy if we want to stay longer on the moon, and all the rest, communication, it's there. Most of the medical risk is the knowledge is there. There are some things that we might work with that, but for missions to Mars, we need to do a lot of work because there is a lot of medical risk we don't know yet. The communications are impossible and probably no access to Earth facilities. Autonomous medical care, it's absolutely required, and there is a lot of research groups that are working on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chrysoula. So now we proceed to Dr. Vangelis Kaimakamis, who has been in Antarctica, as I mentioned earlier on, for 6 months, and he will share with us his own experiences of the field.
Γεια σας και από μένα. Ονομάζομαι Καϊμακάμις Βαγγέλης. Είμαι επιμελητής Α στην Α Μονάδα Εντατικής Θεραπείας στο νοσοκομείο Παπα-Νικολάου. Ευχαριστώ θερμά την Επιτροπή του Aristotle Medical Forum και βέβαια τον κύριο Παμίδη, τον πρόεδρο της συγκεκριμένης τρογγυλής τράπεζας, για την πρόσκληση. Όπως ήδη έχετε δει, οι ομιλίες μας έχουμε αποφασίσει να είναι στα αγγλικά λόγω και του διεθνούς προσκεκλημένου που έχουμε. So I'm going to talk to you about my personal experience from my selection back in 2013. So I was selected by European Space Agency, ESA, to be the research medical doctor in a remote scientific base in Antarctica, the Concordia base, which is a French-Italian scientific base in the mainland of Antarctica. This is my experience from this mission. First of all, let's say very briefly a few things about the 7th continent of Earth, Antarctica. It has a surface of 1.3 times that of Europe, so it's a quite large continent indeed, and it has a mainland below the ice shelf. It is covered by 98% approximately by ice for more than 40 million years in the recent past of the planet. So 90% of the pure water of the planet is stored in the ice shelf of Antarctica. If we consider this, if we contemplate this notion, we understand how important it is for the health of our planet to study the health of this continent. It is the coldest, the driest, and at the same time the windiest place on Earth. It is, of course, due to all these extreme conditions without permanent inhabitants. Only some approximately 1,200 scientists live there every year, mainly due to during the summer season of the continent, which is from November to February. It's in the southern hemisphere, so it is vice versa from what we experience here. And there are around 50 to 60 scientific bases scattered all over Antarctica, mainly in the coastal region of the continent, and only 3 to 5 bases are in the mainland, and from those, only 3 are inhabited during the winter over period of the continent, so from February to November. The one is in the geographical South Pole, it's the Amundsen Scott American base. The other one is the Russian base of Vostok, and the other one is Concordia base, where I had the luck to be a part of during 2013. Here we see a map of Antarctica, and we must imagine that around here, in the center of this plateau, Dome C plateau, Dome Kirki, from the Kirki of Ulysses, it is a plateau of more than 3,000 meters, as you can see here, elevation, with a radius of 600 kilometers. In the center of this plateau, we have the location of the Concordia base. The distance of the base from the coastal bases is 1,100 kilometers, and the distance from the geographical South Pole is 1,600 kilometers. The closest scientific base is that of Vostok, the Russian base, around 560 kilometers away, although during the winter over it is impossible to have commuting between the bases. So essentially the crew is totally isolated, totally confined during the winter over period. The altitude of the base is 3,233 meters above sea level, although the base is situated on an ice shelf with a thickness of 3,500 meters. So we see that there is a huge ice shelf above which the base is situated. And it is one of the very few places on Antarctica that it is not, the ice is not moving. This is why one of the greatest experiments of ice drilling took place there, the Apica project, during which almost 3,300 meters of ice was drilled to get ice pieces, ice carrots, as they call them, to study the geological history of the planet during the last more than 1,000 years. So the average yearly temperature in Concordia base is minus 55 degrees Celsius, and the minimum recorded temperature was minus 86, very close to the minimum ever recorded temperature on Earth, which was close to minus 90. The extreme conditions of cold and drought make it impossible for people to live there outside the protection of the base and all its components, and it is the largest desert on the planet, although it is very, very strange to call it a desert when you sit on 3.5 kilometers of pure water, but it is ice water. There is a total absence of reference points. You cannot see anything but a plateau of ice, totally level for more than 600 kilometers around the base. And of course, people that go there suffer from altitude-induced hypoxia, because due to the fact that the base is situated near the South Pole, we have the pressure altitude of 4,000 meters. The analog of the altitude in the equinox is 4,000 meters. So the partial pressure of oxygen there is really low, and it causes hypoxia to the inhabitants. The transportation is only possible during the 3 summer months. After those months, no one and nothing can be transferred to or from the Concordia base. And of course, there is darkness lasting for more than 3.5 months, essentially from May to August. The sun never rises. And the contrary is valid during the summer months. So from November to February, we have 3.5 months of 24 hours a day sunlight. The base is manned by personnel of 70 to 90 persons during the summer months and the constant transportation of people. Whether during the winter over period, only 12 to 15 persons stay there and inhabit the base as winter over group in order to operate the base and to perform the scientific experiments that can only be operated during those isolation months. For all those reasons that I mentioned before, one can easily understand that Concordia is perhaps the most ideal space analog on Earth. You heard Dr. Papadeli earlier to speak about space analogs and what we're trying to achieve by those. Concordia base is perhaps the most ideal space analog because it's the most isolated, cold and hypoxic environment used as a space analog on this planet. It is served by a multinational small group of people that have to face challenges that resemble the challenges a crew of space station on the Moon, on the planet, on Mars planet, or an asteroid might face. So it is the ideal space analog, and this is exactly the reason that the European Space Agency tries to send a research medical doctor every year there to conduct experiments on aerospace medicine fields. Here you can see the picture of the base during the winter months with a magnificent view of our galaxy. As you can see, these are two cylindrical buildings of 15 meters diameter connected by a corridor, and these staircases here and here are the gateways outside the base to the ice plateau of Dome C. So these are three-story buildings, and of course some other other installations around the base with the engines, the diesel engines that provide the energy to the base, and of course the heating during the winter over months and all the months actually. The building of the base finished in 2005, and since then the base has been inhabited with this multinational crew for winter over periods. I was in the 15th mission during 2013, the 13th mission that inhabited the base, so we were the DC-13 crew for the winter over back then. The base hosts various laboratories and scientific equipment for a variety of scientific fields that are studied there. I can mention to you astronomy, atmospheric physics. One has to bear in mind that this is perhaps the best place on the planet to perform stargazing and measurements on other planets. Meteorology, geology, and glaciology. I told you before about the EPICA experiment. Seismology, and of course, biomedical research. In this picture, we can see the location of the South Pole, the proximate location of Concordia Base, and this is Christchurch in New Zealand, one of the main gateways that lead us to those coastal stations here, and then back to Concordia if we want to get transported from the rest of the world to Concordia Base. These two pictures show the Concordia base, and this is an artistic impression of a proposed base on Mars. You can see the analogs here, so even the shape of the base resembles that of a base on another planet, and this is one additional reason that we are using this base as a space analog on Earth. Another picture showing the night sky during the winter over in Concordia, and in the back of the picture you can see the southern lights. One has to be very lucky to be there during the winter over and witness this magnificent view of the southern lights. Another picture showing the galaxy and the southern lights. You must imagine this with movement, because it's something that moves. It's really spectacular to see it in person. And in the background, 2 kilometers, we are 2 kilometers away from the base during the taking of this picture. But there are some danger occurring during the rapid ascension to high altitudes like the ones in Concordia. You must imagine that we take a plane to be transported from the coastal bases at the mean sea level to the altitude of Concordia, which happens in 2.5 hours. So with this rapid ascension, there are dangers of acute mountain sickness that can occur to everyone that goes there for the first time. So acute mountain sickness might be mild with increased intracranial pressure, headaches, possibility of nausea, vomiting, loss of appetite, many symptoms that resemble those that astronauts, as you heard before, are facing, fatigue and dyspnea, sleep disorders due to the hypoxic environment of the base, central apneas mainly. Moderate syndrome might also include the ataxia, and of course, the severe mountain sickness has to do with either acute pulmonary edema or altitude-induced cerebral edema, and these two manifestations might be even critical and life-threatening, and immediate evacuation to lower altitudes is recommended in these cases. Of course, the human body gets acclimatized to those changes, and even after a few hours after exposure to these high altitudes, the body starts the acclimatization process. This is the adaptation of the body to the reduced atmospheric pressure of oxygen. Initially, 1 to 3 days after ascension, we have an increase on the alveolar ventilation through chemical receptors, up to 60% from the baseline initially, and even up to 700% after some weeks. We have an increase also in pulmonary artery pressure and perfusion of more pulmonary segments to take part in the process of gas exchange. An increase on renin secretion and arterial pressure, as well as cardiac output. Also, we have an increased secretion of erythropoietin, the opposite of what astronauts face, as we listened earlier, in space. So now the hibernauts, as we call the people that stay during winter rovers in these places, in the remote places, have an increased red blood production up to 50% higher hematocrit than the baseline. So you can imagine that it is the ideal place to study this phenomenon, because astronauts, after a transit of many months to another planet like Mars, will have to adapt to the new, even smaller than the Earth's gravity, but in any case, much larger than that in the spacecraft during the space flight. So they will have to start secreting erythropoietin again, and we'll have to study these phenomena in simulated environments before sending these people to Mars. And production of many enzymes that facilitate the easier uptake of oxygen from the tissues. Some countermeasures to acute mountain sickness is the gradual undertaking of heavy tasks. We have to use common painkillers like we do in space. Ibuprofen has been studied, for example. Potential administration of acetazolamide from the previous day in order to avoid the exposure to pulmonary edema. Dexamethasone and nifedipine have seem to play a protective role, although some controversy remains on this subject. Inhaled budesonide has been demonstrated to reduce the frequency. Administration of oxygen for central apneas is also an indication. There is this gum of bag, which is a portable inflatable hyperbaric bag, which increases the atmospheric pressure around the victim of a severe acute mountain sickness. It's a first countermeasure to fight this severe manifestation of the syndrome before rapid descent to a lower altitude. Of course, the best therapy is descent to lower altitude, even to sea level, to coastal bases, if we talk about Antarctica. This is the picture of a gum of bag, inflated to simulate the highest atmospheric pressure. And now, concerning the biomedical research in Concordia, it is, as I told you before, organized by the European Space Agency, which who every year perform a rigorous selection of a research medical doctor that is sent to the Antarctic base of Concordia to perform 7 to 10 biomedical experiments every year. These experiments are selected from institutions all over Europe and America and other places as well. So every 2 years the experiments change, and we study as many things as possible in this very fine simulated environment of the Concordia base. So we study essentially the effect of this unique isolation and the hypoxic stimuli on human physiology and also psychology. This is the laboratory of the ISA medical doctor in Concordia base with equipment used for the scientific experiments of 2013. Some indicative research protocols just to give you an idea of what is being studied in Concordia base constantly. So we have sleep studies. This is one of the most vital experiments taking place there, because we have a very altered sleep pattern due to central hypoxia. And this will also be the case in other bases in other planets with hypoxic environments. And during but also this applies to people with heart failure in normal environments like in Greece. So we have to correlate the central apneas with the circadian rhythm of the patients. We study the daily energy expenditure in relation to recordings of daily food uptake and also some psychological parameters. We examine the cardiovascular system in relation to the vestibular balance and the posture of the subjects. We analyze mRNA agents in human saliva and blood samples. We fill questionnaire based on computer or paper to see the mood changes and the psychology variations during the winter rover that are very well described in the literature. We test some specialized software for the detection of subtle mood changes and group dynamics using some smart games, computer-based. We test digital crew assistants that will help astronauts in future space missions in this simulated environment. And we study the effectiveness of various antimicrobiology textiles and surfaces that we expose to the base during the winter over period. We assess the cognitive performance after prolonged exposure to this hypoxic environment using specialized flight simulators. And we do eye sampling for microbiology analysis for extremophile bacteria that can be found in such extreme environments. Finally, a very sophisticated water recycling system was first tested and transported and tested to this Antarctic base, and then it was evolved, and it is actually one of the main components of the International Space Station. So every source of water is recycled because it's very difficult and, of course, expensive to send water constantly in orbit. Here you see some pictures of the various experiments taking place, the simulated game that analyzes the group dynamics, the sleep studies of the subjects, the exposure of these materials, materials in the hypoxic environment, and of course, eye sampling. One picture of myself in the roof of the base. And you see here the telescopes that are operated in the base. As I told before, it's one of the most ideal places for astronomy observations. And of course, you can also see the total level of ice that you see for hundreds of kilometers around the base. This is one kind of tradition that everyone that stays here for the winter puts a placeholder with his origin, his or her origin, and the distance. So you can see here that the distance from Thessaloniki was 14,630 kilometers. Some spectacular images. Of course, we cannot see it here very well, but it's our galaxy, and as observed by the scientific base of Concordia. And a very short video just to give you an idea of the experience. Take in mind that this video was filmed during the late October of 2013. It was the start of the long period of 24-hour sunlight. The time of the video is midnight, but you see the light in the video. So let me.
Vangelis, you are the doctor of ESA. What are for you the quality to pass a good winter over, please?
Well, first of all, you have to be scientifically capable of withstanding all these challenges here as concerns your own profession. So we are scientists here, and you have to be capable of conducting all these biomedical experiments. And one of the greatest challenges of my job personally is to keep motivated all the people of the base to participate in the experiments, because all of these, of course, are made with humans. So all the members ideally should participate in the experiments in order to have as many data as possible. And of course, during the winter over, the motivation gets very low, especially during the dark months. So it's continuously difficult to keep everyone convinced to keep participating in every experiment. Now, as concerns the challenges of living here in general, I think that one must be really tough as a character and know himself quite well in order to withstand all these negative feelings and emotions that could arise during the winter over, especially during the hardest midwinter months. And of course, be capable of socializing with the other people, not isolate himself, because this is the greatest trap. We have to make groups with other people and socialize with everyone so that we keep interested and motivated.
As you can see, the uniform we were wearing is very close resemblance to the astronaut's uniform, and it is up to a very few minutes, 1 or 2 minutes, that you can do what I just did to show even 1 inch of your skin, because it's a frostbite after that. So, and this was only because now it's a quite hot period for Concordia when this video is filmed, around -50. So with this, thank you very much for your attention.
Ευχαριστούμε πάρα πολύ, Ευαγγέλη, κύριε Καμακάμη. Υπάρχουν ερωτήσεις που θέλετε να κάνετε? Μικρόφωνο μπορούμε να δώσουμε εκεί.
How do you explain physiologically the partial recovery of this young lady? Or did you do any studies to explain this part?
Okay. The basic mechanism is that during certification, there is distribution of the fluid from up of the head to the feet, and then there are reflexes coming back and refreshes the blood on the head. No, that's one mechanism. And the second mechanism is that triggers all the mechanoreceptors of the body or the gravity sensors, which coordinates all the movements. And we have in the inner ear a gravity sensor, which works like a GPS, takes all the information from the body and then acts. So you have two basic mechanisms. If there is a refresher of the blood coming to the head after it goes away, that's the two basic mechanisms that works. We can discuss if you want later. I can explain.
Άλλες ερωτήσεις? If not, you want to say something? Θέλουμε να πούμε κάτι, Χρυσούλα, σαν επίλογο.
Βασικά χαίρομαι πάρα πολύ που υπάρχουν άνθρωποι που ήρθαν να παρακολουθήσουν το session, άρα έχουμε ελπίδες. Εμείς που προσπαθούμε να το διατηρήσουμε ζωντανό, ας πούμε, το κομμάτι αυτό του research, Space Life Sciences Research, είμαστε ανοιχτοί ότι νομίζετε ότι μπορείτε να συνεισφέρετε κι εσείς ερευνητικά και χαίρομαι πάρα πολύ που τελικά τα καταφέραμε και το κάναμε. Αυτό χάρη βέβαια πάντα στον καθηγητή τον κύριο Μπαμίδη. Ευχαριστούμε.
So, final comment from my side. Actually, I want first to congratulate you for a very successful session. Not only that I found a lot of interesting things, mainly in the theory field, but also I agree that the experience of other people not being in the space is very important for the research in this field. Bringing the experience of astronauts, it's an important thing because besides the theory, each of them, they have special ways of adapting, and there are some procedures they discover themselves during the space flight to adapt to some conditions in the space, as I did during my space flight. It is important to have this experience. Now the base for scientific research is much wider than during my space flight. And as I told you in the beginning, there are approximately 600 people already being in the space with a huge experience of living, a lot of them, half a year, more than half a year, some of them close to 1 year or even more. Thank you for the kind invitation, and I wish you success today, tomorrow, and after tomorrow.
Thank you very much. Final comment.
Εγώ θα ήθελα να σχολιάσω ότι η έρευνα της αεροδιαστημικής ιατρικής δεν αφορά μόνο στους αστροναύτες και στις διαστημικές αποστολές. Όπως ήδη είδαμε, εφαρμογές που λαμβάνουν χώρα και έχουν αλλάξει τη ζωή των ανθρώπων εδώ στη Γη και θα συνεχίσουν να την αλλάζουν με όλες αυτές τις εφαρμογές της αεροδιαστημικής ιατρικής. Είναι λοιπόν πολύ σημαντικό να συνεχιστεί αυτή η έρευνα, όπως είναι πολύ σημαντικό επίσης και το Ίδρυμά μας, το Αριστοτέλειο Πανεπιστήμιο Θεσσαλονίκης, να συμμετάσχει και ενεργά. Πιστεύω ότι αυτό, σε σχέση και με αυτά που είχαμε ακούσει και στην προηγούμενη session εδώ πέρα στην αίθουσα, μια από τις μελλοντικές κατευθύνσεις της έρευνας που θα μπορούσε να στραφεί το Αριστοτέλειο Πανεπιστήμιο θα ήταν η έρευνα σε ακραία περιβάλλοντα. Μπορούμε να στείλουμε ερευνητικά πρωτόκολλα σε απομακρυσμένες βάσεις, όπως η βάση Concordia. Η European Space Agency, για παράδειγμα, έχει πάντα ένα ανοιχτό call για τέτοιες ερευνητικές δουλειές που θα μπορούσαν να μελετηθούν εκεί, να μελετήσουμε τις επιδράσεις της υποξίας, της απομόνωσης και όλων αυτών των παραγόντων που αλλάζουν στο ανοσοποιητικό μας σύστημα σε ένα τέτοιο απομονωμένο περιβάλλον. μπορώ να βοηθήσω και εγώ σε αυτό το κομμάτι, αν θέλετε, με την τεχνογνωσία που έχω. Και το άλλο που ήθελα να πω είναι ότι το θέμα φυσικά και δεν το καλύψαμε με τις 3-4 αυτές ομιλίες. Υπάρχουν πάρα πολλά διαστημικά ανάλογα στη Γη, υποθαλάσσια, σε ερημικά περιβάλλοντα, στην Ανταρκτική και σε απομονωμένες βάσεις όπως εξέδρες άντλησης πετρελαίου. Η έρευνα στα ακραία περιβάλλοντα βοηθάει πάρα πολύ την μελλοντική διαστημική εξερεύνηση. Και ενώ ο κόσμος πιστεύει ότι το μεγαλύτερο πρόβλημα είναι η έβρεση χρημάτων και η έβρεση των τεχνολογικών λύσεων για να φτιάξουμε τους πυράβλους ή τα διαστημόπλια που θα μας πάνε στον Άρη, για παράδειγμα, ίσως ένα ακόμα πιο δυσεπίλητο πρόβλημα είναι η μελέτη των επιδράσεων στον ανθρώπινο οργανισμό ενός τόσο απαιτητικού μακροχρόνιου ταξιδιού. Πρέπει να έχουμε υπόψη μας ότι ένα ταξίδι στον Άρη, ακόμα και αν μείνουν ελάχιστα οι άνθρωποι εκεί, θα διαρκέσει περίπου 2,5 χρόνια. Κανείς δεν έχει μελετήσει λοιπόν την επίδραση όλων αυτών των παραγόντων που ήδη ακούσατε στα sessions για τέτοια παρατεταμένα χρονικά διαστήματα. Άρα λοιπόν έχουμε πολύ δρόμο ακόμα μπροστά μας και είναι παρήγορο το ότι βλέπουμε και ανθρώπους που ενδιαφέρονται να μελετήσουν αυτά τα πράγματα και να συνεισφέρουν στην αεροδιαστημική εξερεύνηση, που δεν είναι μόνο για το διάστημα. Ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ.
Ευχαριστούμε πολύ. Ευχαριστούμε όλους εσάς. Το τμήμα ιατρικής με την εξωστρέφεια που το διακρίνει ιδιαίτερα τα τελευταία χρόνια. Νομίζω ότι έχει βάλει κάποιες βάσεις για να συνεχίσει αυτή η έρευνα, μια που ξεκίνησε, και νομίζω πως και ο πρόεδρος που είναι εδώ μαζί μας μπορεί να το υποσχεθεί. Νομίζω πως η επόμενη συνεδρία που πρέπει να της δώσουμε το χώρο για να ξεκινήσει θα είναι ακόμα ένα δείγμα της εξωστρέφειας αυτής. Οπότε σας παρακαλούμε να πάρετε το χώρο. Ευχαριστούμε πολύ όλους.
We are back to online transmission of our Aristotle Medical Forum flow. So the scientific session that will take place now, it's a workshop regarding quality in healthcare and well-being. I have the privilege and the pleasure to co-moderate with João Brenda, who is the head of WHO Athens Quality of Care Office and Special Advisor for Regional Director of WHO. So welcome. And we also have two live speakers join this group. One is Professor Foundoulakis, who is a professor of psychiatry at Aristotle University of Thessaloniki and a dear friend. And on the other side is Professor Hroudakis, who is a professor of medical nutrition and hygiene, again, Aristotle University, and he's also a dear friend. We have connected with us Mr. Theodorakis, who is Senior Health Policy Advisor, WHO Regional Office for Europe. And there are a couple of other pre-recorded video messages and addresses that will accompany our small group discussion here. So I will first introduce what's this initiative about. And I have to say that the Aristotle University School of Medicine lately has started to have an extroverted policy to all aspects of academic research, education, as well as initiative towards strengthen its place and also its policy to all of the academic issues dealing with. One of these is well-being, and what we have as a base, as a background, is very thorough and delicate work of our faculty members. And amongst them, we have the two people that are joining me from psychiatry and from nutrition. So we actually had as a base the mental and nutrition, the mental health and nutrition in the well-being package that we wanted to put it forward as our scope, our goal for the couple of coming years. And for this, what we did is we approached the WHO, which actually is the umbrella of endorsing such activities like the well-being has been described by me. And because of this, we said that we would do a formal collaboration between World Health Organization and School of Medicine Aristotle University towards forming or establishing a well-being center for having all these activities under WHO and having the accreditation of WHO and actually having the means to transmit whatever research will bring forward for the community, because WHO is actually what is built to do. So with this, we picked up these two topics, these two issues, because there are several, let's say, contemporary burdens that make them popular. For example, regarding mental health, you all know that there is social media depression. I mean, the isolation that comes with technology. There is also a lot of post-COVID anxiety, either due to the multiple lockdowns or due to the ongoing fear that comes with the pandemic. There are a lot of burnout issues coming from our modern lifestyle and the overworking. And also, we don't underestimate that technology actually brought a lot of mental issues up to the forefront. Now, regarding diet, I think you all know that the key issue for all us Greeks are the Mediterranean diet, which is the most, let's say, appropriate for the human, but we do have a lot of other breakthroughs or a lot of other issues to complement these initiatives towards diet, like the religious diet. We have a lot of immigrants coming to Greece and to all Europe, that they have specific needs and very different approach to dietary. We also have a lot of problems regarding pediatric obesity and also high BMIs to people due to lifestyle, as I said, to busy life with very minimal exercise. So all these are what we're about to discuss today, and these are what I would say what forced us when we discussed with WHO Athens and Joao Brenda, who is joining me, and also Pavlos Theodorakis from RD Europe office, and also the RD himself, Dr. Hans Kluge, and then we made it possible to start a process. Through that, we would be collaborating with WHO and establish the center. So this is from me, from the side of administration of School of Medicine, and I would give the floor to Joao Brenda, my co-chairman, to give his comment and present the first speaker. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, dear Professor Anastasiadis. It's really a pleasure to be here today. And once again, thank you very much for the very kind invitation. I will always remember my participation last year, which was a remote one. And I have to say, it's a great pleasure to be here in person, and much better to be here in this beautiful city of Salonika. And again, to celebrate a collaboration which we have ignited and we have started. I think this is really very important. WHO is very much dependent on the collaboration with the research centers that work, of course, in the field of health sciences, particularly medical schools. We are an evidence-based organization. So the advice we provide to policymakers, the advice we provide to politicians as a UN organization is based on the best available science. But we don't do all the science, although we do some by ourselves, it's very residual. So we depend on collaboration and we depend on working together with institutions like yours. And Greece is a country that traditionally has been working very closely with WHO in the areas of well-being, mental health, nutrition, and others, because, of course, of your history, of your legacy. I mean, it's a big deal, right? The Mediterranean diet, there's more than 50 systematic reviews that show how good the Mediterranean diet is. But we are losing it, actually, in Greece and in elsewhere. In the southern European countries, we are not benefiting so much as we could. So there's a lot of things we can do. And also, I mean, we also know very well how ancient Greeks and how Greece has contributed to this discourse around well-being and mental health well-being. And therefore, we couldn't find, I would say, a better place to have a new collaborating center, a new, let's say, joint venture where WHO will benefit from the research that you will do for us, that you will do with us, and that you will engage with other parties, tripartite or even beyond that, so that we can better provide support to our constituency, which are the countries. We work for the member states of the WHO European region. We have 53. We are a UN organization, so basically, this is what we do, and we do that depending really on the support by the countries, which we have a great support, by the way, by Greece and by the Ministry of Health of Greece, and we are extremely grateful. This innovative office, which is really groundbreaking and an innovation we have established in Athens in 2021 with a high-level support of the government and also investment from the Greek people. We are very grateful because we are already helping a lot of other countries, many other countries, with this support that Greece is providing pro bono, I mean, in a way which is really very much welcome. So I think this is, it's a great, coincidence that we can establish this center here that will provide evidence and guidance and support to countries. At the same time, will help us supporting the countries also through our office that we have recently established in Greece, which of course has a strong focus on quality of life, well-being, mental health, and also the non-communicable diseases. So again, very grateful for the collaboration. And this is just the beginning. We will have a formal launch of this center sooner than later, but it's a great pleasure to see that we are already working together very nicely. And we are really thankful to the university for this. Thank you very much.
Right. Thank you, Joao. What I think is, as you said, these are steps towards the ultimate goal, which is actually to be nominated and start doing formal research and collaboration with WHO. So with this short presentations from our side, I would call Professor Foudoulakis to give a talk on quality of mental healthcare services as we describe this center. So Professor Foudoulakis, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for the invitation to talk concerning the mental health component of this endeavor and the center. As said, the center focuses on quality, and this means that the component should be viewed and approached through the viewpoint of quality. And what is quality in mental health? Mental health is a very complex field, a very complex topic from A to Z. If we start talking what is mental health, what is psychiatry, what is mental disorder, what is mental disease, where is psychiatry located in the field of sciences, what about our treatment, our diagnostic approaches, where is modern psychiatry located in this continuum from primitive pre-scientific era to the individualized and personalized medicine? Probably something between the unsystematized medicine and the evidence-based medicine, somewhere in the middle, probably, somewhere here. But this is the rule rather than the exception for medicine. However, it is important to reflect on words and the way we talk, discuss, teach, and the way we research in the field of mental health, because the quality of our words define largely where we really stand. A lot of colleagues, I would say with sorrow, that they are closer to the primitive pre-scientific era, while others fantasize they are somewhere very close to the precision and the individualized medicine. We need to have quality, reliability, and validity to our talks and to our words. So the fundamental question whether psychiatry is an art or a science, the answer is definitely a science. Some people say it's an art, but it's not. It's a science. It obeys to the rules of science. It derives models like the very old and traditional Psychosocial Model, which was developed by Engels back in the 70s. It supposed that we have an interaction between biological, that's mostly genetic, psychological, that's personality. This is the way they were approaching human being and existence in the 70s. And the social component. We now know today that this is a very naive approach, but still it was a scientific approach to a very difficult question, and it was an early attempt to strengthen quality of the way we approach the field of mental health. Today, things are far more demanding, and we need to refine and to develop much more reliable and detailed models. And in this sense, we need to approach the quality also of life in our patients and of the general population, because stress is an important component of mental health, and disease in general, mental disease, somatic disease, whatever kind of disease, is a stressful condition that it manifests itself with symptoms which pose an additional stress to the patient. The whole process of diagnosis and treatment, hospitalizations, the whole change in lifestyle, all these produce stress. And for some individuals, this will lead to a deterioration of mental health. So if we are able to improve the quality of diagnosis, the quality of treatment, the quality we approach and communicate information, the quality in the overall life of patients, then we will be able to improve the overall outcome, and the outcome would be the adjustment of the patient at the crossroad of the disease, the personality, the adjustment, and the supporting environment. Now, it is important to note that this dark blue here is the intermediate between clinical depression with the orange and supernormal, which is in the light blue. Let's say that between 15 and 25, 1/4 of the population lives under continuous stress in a distressful condition, depending on the economic, social situation, and the international or local environment and situation. So a large number of people have low quality of life, and they are in demand of quality services and quality help, quality pathways and tools that will help them. Overall, we know that mental illness, especially the most severe end of it, increases death ratio by approximately 1.5 to 2. It doubles the death rate, the mortality rate, and also stigma. The stigma related with any aspect of mental disorder or mental health or individualism within the socio-economic environment. This leads to high degrees of stress, stigmatization, and low quality of life, and eventually to poorer health. And this is reflected mainly in primary health care, where you can see in the blue that that the more somatic complaints are manifested by patients in primary care, the highest the chance they are suffering from a mental disorder, and the blue shows that this is highly likely to be depression. And these mental disorders are highly comorbid with a lot of somatic disorders. More than half of them have any somatic disorders, especially obesity, dyslipidemia, cardiac disorders, or immune disorders, cancer, and endocrinological disorders. And the environment also contributes with mass disasters, contributes to high stress in the population, both in those directly exposed to this mass destruction and to those that are pure observers, but still they are afraid that this will happen again and again, and they are afraid that the social security and the social structure will not protect them from the consequences of such a disaster if it occurs on them. And eventually it's suicidality. You can see the darkest the area, the highest the suicidality rates. To the left are the male suicidal rates, to the right are the female suicidal rates. For Europe, you can see a trend from south to northeast. This picture has not changed through the ages, although individual values do fluctuate. This is the total homicides, again a similar trend. And this is the population getting older throughout the globe. This is the picture for Greece in 30 years from now. That would be a reverse triangle. A lot of things will not be sustainable under such demographics. Also, the quality of services, the needs, the quality indices, everything will be changed in a generation from now, and we need to be able to adjust to this. And also we need to be able to adjust to more personalized things like the therapeutic relationship between patient and physician, the alliance between patient, physician, and the family. The family and the patient should be able to confess, to accept things, to tell little difficult secrets, of their life in order to achieve some kind of better diagnosis and treatment. Let me conclude that quality in mental health is a very complex issue. We need to tackle every bit of it, to synthesize the whole picture and to try to arrive at a better and sustainable constellation of actions and proposals for the society. Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear Professor Foutulakis. An excellent presentation, and really appreciated the link mental health, quality of care. I think this is very important. Certainly, the area of mental health is one where we see many times the challenges in terms of quality and quality of care, and it's probably one where countries and organizations can show more progress, and where we really need to show progress is also a proxy on how health systems perform overall in terms of quality, and that is really great. Thank you for that. So, yeah, and thank you very much for strictly following the time allocated. I'm now delighted to introduce my dear colleague, which I believe is with us remotely online. It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Pavlos Theodorakis. He's a senior advisor at the WHO Regional Office for Europe, and for our regional director, Dr. Hans Kluge. Pavlos has been absolutely essential in the establishment of our new initiative in Greece in the area of quality of care. A great friend, and it's really fantastic to collaborate with him and to see how passionate he is for this topic of quality. So I would immediately like to hand over the floor to Pavlos. I can see he's getting ready, and I think he's absolutely connected and ready to go. Pavlos, are you with us? Can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Very well. Over to you.
Thank you so much, my brother, Dr. Breda, for your kind introduction. And I would also like to thank the AMF for the invitation, but especially the president of the medical school, my also good friend, Professor Kyriakos Anastasiadis, to join this important event, but not only to join this important event, but for all his efforts for more than a year now, together with Professor Foutulakis and Professor Houdakis, to make this collaborating center a practical reality. And we are looking so much forward as WHO Europe to work together in the many years to come. And as Joao already mentioned, we are looking very much forward in the very near future to have the official inauguration of the collaborating center. Can I have my first slide, please? The introductory one, please. Just before that. Thank you. Thank you. I just want a personal note here that as a Helen abroad myself, it is a true honor, my dear President, Professor Anastasiadis, and privilege to be with such a high caliber pool of fellow compatriots. And thank you so much that for a second time in the row, you are inviting me to be there, although virtually with you. I'm currently communicating with you from the capital of Romania in Bucharest. The next slide, please. I would like to start by presenting some very recent, very fresh epidemiological data. According to the WHO World Mental Health Report, which was just published a few weeks ago, of course, the data is pre-pandemic. We always have this time lag between when the data is received and it is published, but it's just 2019, and estimated almost 1 billion people, 970 million people in the world were living with a mental disorder, and the point prevalence was 13%. This is very close to what is the case also the last 20 years is around this 13%. From this evidence alone, we can very easily understand that mental disorders are a significant public health problem. Next slide, please. As you can see, the WHO European region is very high in the rank with 14.2%. This is our region. The 53 member states that constitutes the WHO Regional Office for Europe. Another significant concern is that people with severe mental health conditions die 10 to 20 years earlier than the general population. This vast yet hidden mortality burden of mental health conditions is, of course, as we all understand, of major concern. Next slide, please. Regarding the global burden of mental disorders in disability-adjusted life years, the so-called DALYs, in 2019, across all ages, mental disorders accounted for more than 5%, 5.1% of the global burden. Next slide, please. Moreover, they are the leading cause of years lived with disability, accounting for 1 in every 6 years lived with disabilities globally, and this is more than 15%, 15.6%. Next slide, please. On this slide, we can see 4 different so-called well-being indicators, each capturing how well or not people are thriving or prospering. First, limiting illness. Second, life satisfaction. Third, mental health. And fourth, self-reported health. Unfortunately, I have to say that we are not on track across all 4. And not only that, there are huge gender and socioeconomic differences. Still, let's have a look at the bottom 20% of the population who reported lower life satisfaction. We observe that men in the lowest income quintile are over 3 times as likely to report poor life satisfaction as men in the highest quintile. At the same time, women are almost 2.5 times more likely to do so. Next slide, please. Can I have the next slide? Yeah. Even before the pandemic, mental health systems worldwide were marked by significant gaps in governance, resources, services, information, and technologies for mental health. Several factors stop people from seeking help for mental health conditions, including limited access to quality services, low levels of health literacy about mental health, and pervasive stigma. Can I have the next slide, please? No, the previous one, please. The COVID-19 pandemic has dramatically exacerbated the already substantial health and socioeconomic consequences of mental health conditions and has led to significant changes in the need for and delivery of mental health services. Specifically, anxiety, already pointed out by Professor Foudoulakis, increased in the general population, but for some, the pandemic has also sparked or amplified much more severe mental health problems. At the same time, mental health services have been severely disrupted, especially in the first year of the pandemic. Staff and resources were often redeployed to COVID-19 relief. In addition, social measures that we all experienced frequently prevented people from accessing care, and in many cases, fear of the virus itself stopped people from seeking help. By early 2022, there were fewer disruptions, but too many people still cannot even today get the mental health support they need. Next slide, please. In all countries, gaps in service coverage are compounded by variability in the quality of care. Quality includes how well mental health care aligns, first and most importantly, with the human rights principles, whether treatments meet any defined minimum standards for adequacy, and to what extent mental health care supports social inclusion. Among those people with mental health conditions who are treated, only a very tiny proportion receive care that meets minimum standards of quality care. Often, the range of interventions available is severely limited, with few alternatives, unfortunately, to biomedical-based care available. In many countries, mental health care systems also fail to provide the full range of psychosocial support that people living with mental health conditions can require. Next slide, please. The enhancement of mental health care requires multi-dimensional approaches. In this context, very recently, just a year ago, in 2021, the Pan-European Mental Health Coalition was launched by our regional director, Dr. Hans Kluge, and Queen Mathilde, of all Belgians, in the presence of Her Excellency, also Deputy Minister of Health of Greece, Ms. Rapti, in Brussels, to drive the implementation of the WHO European Framework for Action on Mental Health, which spans from 2021 to 2025. The European Mental Health Coalition's three main goals are to transform mental health services. First, second, integrate mental health into emergency response and recovery efforts. And third, promote and protect mental health across the lifespan. Next slide, please. Another crucial step for the improvement of the quality of care, as already mentioned by Joao, and beyond, is the establishment of the WHO Athens Quality of Care and Patient Safety Office in April 2021 under the leadership of Dr. Joao Breda. Next slide, please. With the strong support of the Greek government, the office is already expanding by covering new workflows in the area of quality mental health services, focusing especially on children and adolescents. Next slide, please. At this point, and before we demonstrate how the quality of mental health care relates to the quality of life and well-being through the international literature, let's define the quality of life and well-being. So according to WHO, quality of life is an individual's perception of their position in life in the context of the culture and value systems in which they live and in relation to their goals, expectations, standards, and concerns. Next slide, please. Concerning well-being, according to the proposed WHO definition, it exists in two dimensions. First, subjective, and second, objective. It comprises an individual's life experience and a comparison of life circumstances with social norms and values. Next slide, please. With regards to the international literature, in a very important study published very recently in 2021, which aimed to assess and compare quality of life across different mental health settings, it was found that quality of life is positively associated with the satisfaction of mental health services provision. What does this mean? This means that higher quality of mental health care service provision is associated with higher quality of life. Next slide, please. In a literature review published a few years ago in 2019, it was found that the number of factors, 8 factors, were used to assess mental health care. Amongst them is the suitability of services, the accessibility of patients to services, the continuity of services over time, safety also, for example. And these 8 factors affect the quality of life, morbidity, mortality, well-being, as well as life expectancy, directly or indirectly. Next slide, please. And this is the last paper, but very important. As it can be seen in Bazu's longitudinal study, the quality of life construct has been used both as a dependent but also as an independent variable. The first case, as a dependent variable, is the more traditional use of the quality of life construct, e.g., something that both you, all the 3 of the professors in this table are very well aware. I'm referring to the clinical trials. Here, quality of life is used as an outcome measure to examine the effectiveness, but also the adverse effects of a particular therapeutic intervention. Thus, quality of life itself is an indicator of the quality of healthcare. Regarding the second case, as an independent variable, is a less used, more controversial, but potentially very beneficial application of quality of life. Here, the quality of life data gathered from a particular patient is used as an independent variable in predicting other outcomes. For example, in quality of individual healthcare or quality of care. In this usage, quality of life is not an outcome measure, but influences it. Next slide, please. Lastly, a review published in 2014 found that improving mental health care through quality of life indicators is a goal for clinical research and practice. By addressing patients' concerns and taking into consideration quality of life, therapeutic alliance, patients, physicians interactions, and adherence can be improved. Next slide and final one. As a take-away message, I would like to emphasize the bi-directional relationship between improved quality of treatment or other forms of mental health care can be demonstrated by improving quality of life and well-being of the recipients of such care. Meanwhile, assessing patients' quality of life and well-being can serve as a method of improving mental health care by providing feedback. And my thank you slide, please. I would like to end my intervention with a statement made some 70 years ago from Dr. Brock Chisholm, the first ever Director General of the WHO. DG said at that time that without mental health, there can be no true physical health. And what DG, Director General, said at that time echoed what our Hippocrates, the father of medicine, said 2,500 years ago, that every disease begins from the psyche, begins from the soul. Thank you so much for your attention, and thank you for once more, Professor Anastasiadis, for giving me the chance to join you today. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Dr. Theodorakis. It was a pleasure to having you with us remotely, and we hope next time when we were about to present this initiative under WHO, you'll be here. And also we will have the opportunity to have another session on well-being in the next AMF next year.
I hope so. Thank you so much, President. Thank you so much.
So we will now switch to the other half of our well-being center, which is actually nutrition and the relationship of quality of life and nutrition as far as well-being is concerned. So Professor Chourdakis will present the topic and hopefully clear up the whole issues. Professor Houdakis.
Thank you so much for the invitation, and I'm also taking the opportunity to thank Professor Anastasiadis because he's coordinating and helping and continuing the initiation started with Professor Dobros more than a decade ago to build a very strong nutrition curriculum in our school, being maybe the only one in Europe and among the very few in the world having an elective course in the 3rd year, a main course in the 5th year, and very successful postgraduate studies for health promotion and applied nutrition already since 4 years. And I'm also thanking Dr. Breda and Dr. Theodorakis because they are being very strong support to the efforts we are having for this collaborating center, and without them, it would never have moved forward. So I'm taking the opportunity to present you some data about the interaction and the relation between nutrition and well-being and quality of life. We have already heard how important mental health might be. And as you can see here, in the last many decades, almost 2 centuries, poverty is going down, education, literacy are going higher, democracy rates are improving, at least theoretically, vaccination and is getting better, child mortality is getting lower. And all this overall, among other things, have resulted in a higher happiness rate, higher life satisfaction, higher subjective well-being rate, despite the fact that you can see in the yellow line dropping in the left part of this slide, that income is going down overall. And it might be that this good things happening to our well-being and quality of care might also be related to other factors. And let's see if nutrition is playing a role or could be playing a role here. First of all, there is this study showing the trends in diet quality among older adults in the United States, starting in the beginning of the 21st century and almost for 2 decades, studying what was happening. And as you can see here, the trends are not going only to one direction. For some food categories, there is some improvement. For some others, there is some other trend in the consumption rates. But overall, we have to admit that nutrition is changing in the last years. But what is happening or what has happened in Europe during the last years? In this study published last year, we had almost 5,000 people, all of them Spanish university graduates, and the study tried to elaborate and see if there were changes in the dietary quality indices over the 10-year study period, trying to find changes in main diet patterns like the DASH diet, the MIND diet, which is also related to mental disorders, different types of Mediterranean diet. And overall, the Mediterranean diet adherence, the highest it was, the better the results, and the improvements were stronger for those being females, being older than 35 years old of age, and for those being more physically active. So this might be a good way to start targeting the population who might need help, because these 3 categories are among those who need less help because they have been improving even without some intervention. In another study, systematic review trying to find the association between different dietary patterns and health-related quality of life. You see 8 of those studies were between different Mediterranean diet patterns, whereas the 5 were in different health diet patterns, but not exclusively relevant to the Mediterranean diet. But both categories scored better for quality of life, irrespectively of the tools, scores, and scales that were used, which gives us a very strong hint that the type of quality, the type of diet plays a very important role in the overall quality of life, and as well as scales regarding physical activity and mental health were also better with these types of diets. In another study, and this systematic review and meta-analysis included only children and adolescents. Here again, you can see that the better the diet that was used, or the diet that was followed, because this was not an intervention, the higher the quality of life and well-being scales. Could it be that a diet which is very specific and relevant to a health problem might be worsening quality of life? Yes, of course. But at the same time, we see that even with celiac disease, which needs, its patients need a very specific and diet fully excluding gluten, still you can see that there were no big differences in the quality of life between those following the diet and healthy controls. At the same time, for those having some other gastroenterological issues which do not have at this point a very specific treatment, some nutritional interventions have been tested, such as using a low FODMAP diet. And for example, for irritable bowel syndrome, you can see that such type of diet brings specific improvements in the condition, and in this way indirectly improves their overall quality of life and well-being. What might be the pathways that bring us to this result? As you can see here, a good quality diet, meaning better fats, limited fast food and limited sugars and not too many salt, abundant fruits and vegetables and high fiber, is going to improve the physical health due to multiple biological pathways, either because there is insulin is working better, there is a less cardiovascular risk, weight is tending to maintain towards a healthy degree, and other health behaviors, which all of those at the same time are very crucial determinants also for the physical and mental health and comorbidities, because a healthier weight might be is linked to better physical activity, and this is also a good thing for mood. It lowers the stress, it lowers the risk of illnesses, and at the same time, not having them brings you to this positive cycle of again getting back to a higher and a better diet. Some very basic hints on a couple of pathways could be that the high glycemic index or high glycemic load diet, or a diet which is very high in refined carbohydrates, might be among the very important facts that play this role. And this is, as I'm going to show you in one of my next slides, well related also to the fact that with following a low glycemic index diet, you avoid very big disturbances of the concentration of glucose. Same results in another diet among women. And here you can see in this systematic review and meta-analysis, these two are randomized controlled trials. There was an intervention with the use of a lower or a higher glycemic index. And as you can see, results showed that there might be 20 to 35% improvement among those patients. So last study that I want to show you is this one with the very nice and catchy title, Let Them Eat Fruit. Here they try to change the pattern of carbohydrate intake among young adults, meaning trying to shift them from eating refined sugars to eat more fruits. And the controls, there was no intervention among them, whereas the light gray line, the EMI, they were only being reminded to eat more fruits. And the last arm of this study, the VI, they were not only reminded, but they were given vouchers to get free fruits. And as you can see here, both for vitality as well as for flourishing, there was a big change, even only after 14 days of eating more fruits and shifting from refined sugars to fruits instead as a main source of carbohydrates. So this is another hint where we could be targeting young adults and shifting them from the refined sugars. And with this, I want to show you my last slides, which is about the interaction that vitamin D could be having on the well-being and the quality of life. But this study is not an intervention from food, it's a supplementation. And as you can see, even though for some of the outcomes, vitamin D supplementation might be favored, from some others, it's not. So at the moment, we could not give such a guideline. Thank you so much for your attention, and I'm open to question as well as with this, discussing all that is open with the rest of the panel.
Thank you. Thank you very much, dear Professor Kourdakis. Thank you very much for an excellent presentation, and the links you made with well-being, they're very, so important. And they really show how critical it is and relevant it is for us to pursue this project together, where through food and nutrition and mental health, we really address well-being in a more decisive way. I think I have the great pleasure now to introduce the next speaker, which is joining us with a pre-recorded video, is the Honorable Deputy Minister of Health, Madam Zoe Rapti. Again, a great pleasure, because it is someone with whom we have been collaborating through the WHO Regional Office for Europe and through the Athens Quality of Care Office very closely, in a very nice way. We are very grateful for her support and really for allowing us to put together and start an initiative on quality of mental health services for children and adolescents, which is really unique in Europe. So if I may get our regie to give us the video from Madame Rapti, I would be very grateful. Thank you very much.
Dear all, Dr. Anastasiadis, Professor Fundoulakis, Professor Kourdakis, Yavid, Barazzoni, and doctors Breda and Theodorakis, good afternoon. Thank you very much for inviting me to participate in the Aristotle Medical Forum session, Quality in Healthcare and Well-being. I would like to congratulate the School of Medicine of the Aristotle University of Thessaloniki and the Secretary General for the Greeks Ahead and Public Diplomacy, Professor John Chrysoulakis, for organizing this amazing event. Greece has a long history in the field of mental health. Hippocrates said that every disease starts from the soul, and this statement is more relevant than ever because the pandemic brought mental health in the spotlight globally and of course in our country. It has shown that there is no health without mental health and holistic well-being. In this direction, significant steps have been taken so far by the Greek government with the creation of a special portfolio dedicated to mental health and addictions. To reach each and every citizen of our country, we created a national helpline, a hotline, 10306, for psychosocial support of the general population that up to now, in the 2 years of the pandemic, has received more than 450,000 phone calls. In parallel, we are creating a telepsychiatry network in order to help people that live in remote, mountainous areas and isolated islands. We first operated such services in Castellorizo, our island, and Simi, and we are now proceeding to operate one in Halki. Through the Recovery and Resilience Facility, we are developing new mental health facilities and services in the community. we are developing innovative services for the quality of improvement of our youth, and such are the units for the early intervention in psychosis and the units, psychosocial centers, that are created in our university to help our students. Also, to realize our goals, we have created a national action plan for mental health with a 10-year horizon. The pandemic also taught us the importance of international collaborations and synergies. Therefore, in the direction of promoting mental well-being, we launched a new WHO office in Athens on quality of care and patient safety that will also develop a European program on quality of mental health services for children and adolescents. Also, a key pillar of the Athens Declaration adopted at the Athens Mental Health Summit last July by the 53 states of WHO Europe is the promotion of well-being. That is why our vision of quality mental health services requires the cooperation, and this is something in which we believe strongly in, cooperation of the state, the scientific community, and the mental health professionals in a national and international level. Once again, thank you very much. I wish every success to this global initiative of the School of Medicine of the Aristotle University of Thessaloniki, and may it continue growing in the years to come. Thank you very much.
Well, we need to thank Deputy Minister, Madame Rapti, for her video, and also we hope next time she will be here in person to enjoy her talk and also all the discussions that we have with her. And now finally we will end this session with two senior scientists on the two topics that we have discussed on mental health and nutrition. So it's a pleasure for me to present Afzal Zaved, who is a consultant psychiatrist and a social clinical professor in Warwick Medical School, and also serves as a president of World Psychiatric Association. Professor Zaved is connected remotely, so we hope we have with him. Dr. Zaved?
Good afternoon.
Hello.
Dear friends, participants, ladies and gentlemen, and honorable dignitaries participating in this session. I, on my personal behalf and on behalf of the World Psychiatric Association, brings greetings for the International Conference of Hellenic Medical Diaspora. Medicine and Greece are two integral components. The modern medicine owes a lot to the Greek physicians, scientists, and the notable people who have led the world in the field of medicine. This program is very impressive and brings science closer to the academic and research knowledges. Unfortunately, I was unable to attend in person, but I feel so grateful that the organizers have asked me to send a word of greetings. Congratulations to the organizers and all the best to the distinguished leaders of medical specialties and participants. I'm also pleased that this forum has got the blessings from the Department of Mental Health of the Greek government, and that really shows the interest of the government and the policymakers in updating, helping, and supporting medical professionals. Thank you very much.
So thank you, Mr. Zaved. I think we do have Mr. Zaved online for
yes,
a live session. Yeah, that was pre-recorded. Sorry, I thought that you are remotely connected, but we do have now live. So you can add or comment to your pre-recorded message, Dr.
well,
Zaved.
thank you very much. Thank you very much, and I'm really grateful and obliged to the organizers for bringing this very important topic specifically related to the quality of life. And as we have listened to different dimensions of quality of life, and then the emphasis by the Honorable Minister about the links of mental health with quality of life, and the great work that WHO and the government of Greece are doing. I think I will only just take a couple of minutes to emphasize that when we talk about the quality of health care, the importance of mental health becomes even more important. Many of you must have seen the latest WHO report, which emphasizes about the impact of COVID on mental well-being. That clearly shows that whenever there is an issue of quality of life, well-being, care, immediately we start thinking about the mental health. And the important and very popular slogan, no health without mental health, again emphasizes and give us the backing of this particular concept about strengthening the quality of healthcare. I'm sure these deliberations will help us, and more importantly, that will generate some more interest among non-psychiatrists and non-psychiatry specialties, looking at the ways and means, how can we improve the well-being of our patients, even if they may be coming to cardiology, orthopedics, oncology, diabetology. And the issue of comorbidity of physical disorders with mental well-being is now well established. I would like to emphasize that World Psychiatric Association, and thanks to Professor Fontolakis, who is our zonal representative representing WPA in this region, that we are promoting the concept of comorbidity of physical and mental disorders. Comorbidity looking at different dimensions of physical and mental health. And we hope that this issue will be strengthened, not only at our clinical, academic, or research levels, but also at the level of the policymakers. And the best example we have seen is the interest of the health ministry of Greece in terms of having a dedicated and very talented minister who is looking after the mental health. So thank you very much, and I wish all of you a great success.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your very nice intervention and for putting such a nice accent on the issue of quality of care and the links, quality of care, mental health, also food and nutrition. And it's really interesting to realize that all of this is coming together. And thank you very much for taking your time today. It's really a great pleasure, and I'm sure we will be collaborating more with the Quality of Care Office in Athens and with this future collaborating center here at the University of Saloniki. So I think that we will now move to the last speaker, which is also joining us with a pre-recorded video. Someone I know very well, my dear friend Rocco Barazzoni. Rocco is an associate professor of internal medicine at the Trieste University. He is the chairman of EXPAN. EXPAN is a very important scientific society that works on nutrition with a very solid track record in this area, particularly clinical nutrition, and will have definitely a very important contribution to this discussion. So I would ask the Regie if they could give us Rocco's video, please. Thank you very much.
Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, it is a pleasure and an honor for me to participate in this meeting and represent the European Society for Clinical Nutrition and Metabolism, ESPEN. I am very grateful to Aristotle University and to Professor Michael Chourdakis in particular for the invitation. As chairman of ESPEN, I wish to make a key starting point that an impaired nutritional state and undernutrition, what indeed the clinical nutrition community indicates as malnutrition, is a crucial medical problem, and its treatment should be a key target for quality health care. Indeed, malnutrition is not only the result of food deprivation and starvation from poverty, social problems and emergencies, but it is also a major complication of virtually every disease, from common mechanisms that include low appetite and inability to store and use nutrients. And this disease-related malnutrition is more and more common, with increasing frequency of non-communicable diseases that are related, for instance, to the increase in the aging population worldwide, but also to other social and epidemiological health challenges, such as the growing prevalence of obesity, of course. It is also a major risk factor for virtually all non-communicable diseases and may therefore be characterized by a double burden of malnutrition, with excess fat, but also low lean muscle mass, with sarcopenia and functional impairment. These are general numbers from UK surveys that are largely applicable to many other European countries, showing the huge prevalence of malnutrition, for instance, in hospitalized patients, with about 1 in 3 affected. And as we mentioned earlier, the prevalence increases with increasing age and frailty. And what is clinically most relevant is that malnutrition has a huge negative clinical impact, again, in virtually any disease condition, by increasing complications and disabilities, reducing survival and increasing care needs and costs. There has been very important good news actually for healthcare and for ESPEN as a clinical nutrition society in the past several years, as growing evidence has emerged that malnutrition can be treated by nutritional support, or rather what we call nutritional care, which has proven effective in strong high-quality studies. I will mention just a few examples. This is a study of nutritional support in older hospitalized patients, showing positive impact of nutrition on functional states, complication, and indeed 1-month mortality. This is an even larger study showing the positive impact of nutritional support again in hospitalized patients in many settings and conditions, resulting in improvements in many relevant outcomes, again including mortality. This slide shows an interesting Cochrane study directly supported by ESPEN, which was able to also prove a positive impact on nutrition on healthcare costs, indeed showing its effectiveness to improve patient outcomes, but also to reduce costs of care. So I think to conclude this first part of my talk that it is very logical to say that nutritional care is needed for quality health care, with an overarching impact on virtually every disease and clinical setting and condition. Unfortunately, the level of implementation of nutritional care in everyday clinical practice remains relatively low, or anyway largely incomplete. We believe that this is due to a number of factors, including low awareness of the malnutrition problem, of its relevance, and that there are available treatment options. There are, however, some encouraging signs, strong signs, I would say, that policymakers are more and more realizing the importance of nutrition. This is a statement from the Beating Cancer Plan, which was issued last year from the European Union and explicitly mentioned the role of nutritional support in optimal cancer patient care. And as we are speaking of quality today, the plan underscored the importance of training healthcare professionals to ensure quality choices and selections. As I represent ESPEN today, our mission is to implement best quality nutritional care by promoting best science, education, and clinical practices in the field. So we aim at enhancing knowledge and make sure it becomes available to make everyday care a quality care in every setting. The basic steps of an overarching approach should be identification of patient nutritional needs, and once this is established, implementation of best nutritional support. Cancer is mentioned in this algorithm, but in fact it is directly applicable to any other condition. Identification of nutritional needs should be a reliable and at the same time simple step. Screening of malnutrition risk and malnutrition diagnosis are crucial to stratify clinical risk and decide intensity of treatment and monitoring, which also is key to optimize available resources. We should be aware that these screening and diagnosis tools exist and can be used after relatively simple training, potentially also by non-nutrition healthcare professionals or specialists. This is, for instance, a very simple tool for malnutrition diagnosis from a consensus initiative of all major global nutrition societies, including 5 basic parameters, where GLIM stands for Global Leadership Initiative on Malnutrition. Indeed, we are also using the GLIM template and approach to apply for modification of the current diagnosis of malnutrition in the ICD International Classification of Disease system, which is currently unfortunately likely to miss a high number of disease-related malnutrition patients. This was truly a global initiative from Sweden with networking of more than 40 societies worldwide, and we received a first reply and had a promising meeting in May. We will follow up and hope on a positive outcome. Coming back to the algorithm, after identification and stratification of patient needs, nutritional support should be of the highest possible quality level to optimize decisions based on options and needs. This is, I believe, another key step for quality implementation, where full patient nutritional assessment should be performed by trained and skilled professionals in the context of a multidisciplinary team. Again, in this context, ESPEN seeks to combine dissemination of best knowledge with enhancement of awareness of available quality care in the clinical nutrition community and also in non-nutrition healthcare professionals. The ESPEN approach starts by making a complete survey with evidence-based recommendations in guidelines based on rigorous methodology that support decision-making to optimize treatment. As we want to make it also realistically possible to reach busy colleagues and professionals to use this knowledge, we have started to routinely prepare what we call practical guidelines that are based on simplified graphical algorithms and are also available in apps for rapid consultation. Professor Choudakis is also a part of the ESPEN guideline teams, and I thank him for his activities in that. Implementation barriers also include language, and we collaborate, for instance, with many national societies at country level, also outside of Europe, to encourage translation of the practical guidelines. Besides preparation of specialized guidelines, we believe education is in general the best possible investment to prepare any professionals and future colleagues so that the workforce for quality care will be more and more available in the future. I just wish to mention that ESPEN has invested in a comprehensive educational approach addressing dozens of disease conditions that is available in the online portal of the ESPEN Lifelong Learning or LLL educational program. More than 20,000 people have already used at least some of the available tools, including online individual sessions and live events, which very early during the pandemic were also transformed into webinars, actually, that are now also regularly performed around the world. Since a few years, we have also decided to promote university teaching of nutrition and clinical nutrition in medical schools, which is unfortunately currently not part of regular curricula and therefore is extremely variable. ESPEN has established a nutritional education in medical schools or NEMS initiative to create a network with university leaders around Europe, and just very recently we have started with pilot teaching projects to compare various models. I'm happy to say again that Greece and Aristotle University with Professor Choudakis are very active in this field and part of the initiative. And since we believe that success is difficult without involving end users or final stakeholders, we have successfully networked also with student organization, and I must say it has been very refreshing to find their high enthusiasm and interest in nutrition. Also very important and encouraging, the European Commission has shown high interest in this concept, and the NEMS project is becoming an excellent template for networking in our society. I have used the word networking. I think this is a real key word I wish to underscore as I move towards the end of my presentation, We believe that networking is necessary with our colleagues from all professions in nutrition healthcare and in other medical specialties, and this slide indicates some collaborations that ESPEN has started or strengthened in the last several years. As you can see, this includes obesity, oncology, nephrology, gastroenterology, as well as primary care, and we also collaborate with dietitians and nurses organizations in the field of nutrition. Nutrition Day is a long-established initiative of ESPEN for collaboration. It is in team with Vienna University and a combination of science, clinical research, education, and political dissemination. It collects information on hospital nutritional care in all kinds of settings and medical specialties, and therefore provides an excellent example of what I just tried to describe. To raise awareness of importance and also, unfortunately, sometimes on the limits of implementation that we need to overcome. The 2022 edition will be on November 10, and we trust it will continue to succeed in its ambitious goals. And finally, a most important strategic approach is to develop cooperation with institutional partners. And we are very proud of our recent collaboration with WHO Europe, which is actually part of the event today. I think its value for influencing policies and implementation should be quite obvious. We started in 2019, just before the pandemic, and have set an agenda which is continuing to move forward. As we have applied now for non-state membership in November last year and hope to continue with successful projects really in all fields of nutrition and clinical nutrition. I wish to conclude now really by mentioning, I think, a very important initiative that results from another crucial network activity of our society. The initiative aims at promoting the concept that indeed nutritional care is not only just another potential treatment option, but should be regarded as a human right. This is based on the well-established concept that indeed food and daily nutrition are already naturally considered as fundamental human rights, and indeed a foundation for life that should be granted for every human being. But the right to food should not be neglected when we need it most, that is, when we become sick and regular food intake becomes impossible or ineffective. In these conditions, we need nutritional care, or indeed we need to be fed as supplement or alternative to regular feeding. A global declaration on this concept will be issued during the coming ESPEN Congress in Vienna on September 5, and representatives from the main global clinical nutrition societies will join and sign the Vienna Declaration, again to promote the human right to nutritional care. More than 40 societies worldwide have already endorsed the declaration, and I hope you may consider to attend the Congress also for this reason, and of course for top updates on all key topics in clinical nutrition. So with this, I wish to close my presentation. Thank you for your attention and the opportunity to present our activities in this very important context, and for the invitation. It has been a real pleasure and honor to participate. Thank you again.
Thank you very much. This was an excellent presentation and a very nice way to round up our session today. This brings us really towards the end. We had great discussions on well-being, focusing on the links between mental health, food and nutrition with a quality perspective. This has been a journey that went from the situation in the European region to very specific elements around collaboration, all having at the center this new idea that we have of establishing a hub here in Salonika around really well-being that represents a very nice collaboration between the WHO Regional Office for Europe, our office in Athens, the Athens Quality of Care Office, and again, the university by means of establishing a brand new collaborating center. And I take the opportunity particularly to thank the two main persons really critically involved in the discussions and in the establishment of this center that has two main pillars, and having here with me Professor Foudoulakis and Professor Kourdakis. It's a great pleasure, and thank you very much for really being with us and accepting to follow on this journey together. I'm very much looking forward to come back when we officially launch this center, and again next year to yet another discussion on well-being and quality of care. So thank you very much. I really appreciate all of those in the room for staying with us today, and also those who joined online and those who are actually going to see the recording at the library in the future and the coming weeks. Thank you very much. And this session adjourns here. Thank you.